Hey everyone, welcome to another installment of Echo Worm Live. These are bi-weekly live streams that we do pretty much every other Thursday, where we just talk about some questions that you guys have left in the chat or in the Discord, or just throughout YouTube in general, just talking about the different properties and what's coming up on the channel, what's going on the other channel, and that sort of thing. So today we are going through a ton of your pre-prepared questions, but if you are in the chat, as usual, you are more than welcome to ask questions. Anything that I see going through the chat that I'm comfortable answering, I'm always happy to do so. So for those of you that are here, welcome. Thank you very much for joining us. Let's get started with a question from Justin Siegel, who says, when are the other chapters getting posted? So how we do things on the channel, and this is a question that is asked very often, is we'll post 2 chapters a day, one for usually a Percy Jackson property and one for one of our other properties that we're going through. The other one right now is Voyage of the Dawn Treader, the 5th of the Chronicles of Narnia series. So Chronicles of Narnia will be posted at midnight, and then the Percy Jackson book will be posted at about 10 a.m. That's Central Time. I'm on Central Time. And so 2 chapters a day, and then occasionally a chapter of something else will pop up in the afternoon every other day or so. So it'll go every day a new chapter until we get to about halfway through the book. If a book is short enough where I can get the entirety of the book into less than 10 hours of content, then it'll be the entirety of the book. We'll do every chapter, and then it'll be compiled into one big thing. But with the case of Percy Jackson or Heroes of Olympus, this is a bad example because this is a George R.R. Martin book, but we'll get through about halfway or a third of the way through, whatever we can fit in under 10 minutes, and then we will post it to the channel once we're done with those chapters. So Voyage of the Dawn Treader will be up in its entirety once we get through all, I want to say 17 chapters, and then Heroes of Olympus, House of Hades specifically has, I think, 72 chapters, maybe a little more than that. It might be 78, but I know we split it at 36. So after the 36th chapter or so, we should be dropping the first half of the House of Hades full version, I guess you can say, even if we split it in 2. Sari says, will you ever read the Inheritance Cycle or the Aragon series? Yes, I'm slowly working my way through it. I think eventually, if it picks up on the channel, then we'll do it as like an everyday thing. There are a few series that I have scheduled for like an everyday chapter sort of thing. And so right now, obviously, those 2 are Percy Jackson and Heroes of Olympus and I just said it, Narnia, thank you. But then in my free time, whenever I get some free time, then I'll do a chapter or 2 of like Aragon or the Maze Runner or whatever. And when those are full, then I will put those on the channel. But right now, I'm not very far into it. But yes, it is on my schedule. So Joseph Morrill says, Echo, it's my birthday today. Well, happy birthday, Joseph. I saw that it's your 22nd birthday. You mentioned that in the Discord. So happy birthday. Very happy to have you as part of this community. And hopefully your day is excellent. I'm happy that you are sharing that special day with us and with me today. So book suggestion, since you definitely need it, is Catch-22. I do have it somewhere on my shelf, and I'm actually looking at it. It's way in the back there. It's Heller is the author's last name, so it's right before Dune in my collection because my books are alphabetical by author. But yes, it's old enough where I think other channels have probably posted it before me, but I'll definitely check it out and see if it's something I want to read on the channel. Percabeth says, or Percabeth, however you want to pronounce it, says, will you ever read the Series of Unfortunate Events? Yes. One of these behind me is the first book of a Series of Unfortunate Events. I wanted to get through the Spiderwick Chronicles before I started reading Series of Unfortunate Events because they are very similar in tone. And so I just finished Wrath of Mulgaroth. That should be up on the channel by the end of the month. I know it's already up on Patreon. So as soon as that is up, then I will start working my way towards at least the first of the Series of Unfortunate Events books. But yes, it is absolutely on my list. Benjamin Gibson says, will you read the entire Bible? Hopefully. Right now, I mean, there's hundreds, if not thousands of chapters of the Bible. So right now, my goal is every day I get through all of my recording of all my other books, and then I record 1 chapter of the Bible. So right now I think I'm definitely not going in order. Right now, I'm through the first 11 chapters of First Corinthians, and so once I get through all 16 chapters of First Corinthians, I'll compile it and post it in a full First Corinthians thing. My goal is 3 years, so hopefully by the end of the summer of, let's say, 2026, I'm hoping to have the entirety of the Bible done. Yes. Sanjudy Saprova says, I was listening to your Percy Jackson audiobooks once and finished one book, and I saw that some of the audiobooks weren't there anymore. When I tell you my world came crashing down. All of the Percy Jackson books should be there. Let me just double check something real quick. We've never had issues with copyright. We've never had issues with copyright for Percy Jackson, so let me just double check unless something happened that I don't know about. Yep, every Percy Jackson book should be there. So all 5 of the original series should be on the channel. If you go to the Camp Half-Blood, the Camp Half-Blood Chronicles playlist, first 5 should be there. Demigod Files should be up there. Both parts of Lost Hero, both parts of Mark of Athena, and both parts of Son of Neptune should be up there as well. And we're doing daily chapters now of House of Hades. So if for whatever reason you can't find that, let me know. Hunger Games and Harry Potter have had to be moved over to Vimeo and Patreon. Those are still available for free over there, but Percy Jackson should still be available on the channel. So let me know if that's not the case for you. Percibes says, if you want any, I have all the books. I have the first couple. My wife's a really big fan of them, so I do own a couple of them. I've never actually read past, I think, the 3rd book, so I'm curious to see how far we get on the channel. Joseph Morrill says, of course, once again, I'm at work, so shush, keep that a secret. Sorry, I got distracted. Yes, I will not tell your employer. Sorry. Sanjudy Saprova says, I've tried listening to the official audiobooks and even other people who voice over them, but none of them have given me the satisfaction compared to listening to yours. Well, thank you very much. I really appreciate hearing words like that. Some of the videos actually disappeared for a few days, but I'm glad to know it's back up. As far as if you're talking about when the channel switched, that was a couple months ago. But otherwise, everything should be up. And if they ever disappear, let me know, because that's not something that should happen unless I address it. Percabest says you should read Chalice of the Gods and When Wrath of Triple Goddess when it comes out. Yes. I have finished Chalice of the Gods. I'm waiting to release it until we're done with Heroes of Olympus. So there aren't spoilers for Heroes of Olympus. So I think it's scheduled for mid-September for the regular channel and mid-August for Patreon. So Chalice of the Gods should be out at the end of the summer here. And then within a week of Wrath of the Triple Goddess coming out at the end of September, I'm hoping to have it up on the channel. So yes, they will both be up by the end of September. Let's go to a question from Mickey, who says, why is Prisoner of Azkaban considered the best Harry Potter book? That's kind of a loaded question. It's a good question, though. So my personal favorite book is Half-Blood Prince. And I've mentioned this before on live streams, but typically what happens for me is because of the way that story arcs progress and fall, my favorite books in every series are almost always the penultimate book or the second to last book. So for Harry Potter, it's Half-Blood Prince. For Percy Jackson, it's Battle of the Labyrinth. For Hunger Games, it doesn't really matter because it's a trilogy, but it's Catching Fire. So Prisoner of Azkaban, though, has, since it was released in 1999, widely been regarded as the best Harry Potter book, or at least one of them, consistently. And part of that is, one thing that Prisoner of Azkaban does really well is people will argue that the time travel thing is really, really a kind of a retcon device. But when you think about time as a concept, and this is even true in the film, when you think about time as a concept and what it means to Harry as a 13-year-old, as an angsty 13-year-old boy, the storylines in this book, and friendship and isolation and all of those things, all of the themes in this book are significantly greater than they were in the first 2 books, and a lot tighter than some of the themes in some of the later books. It's the last Harry Potter book before they start getting really long, and so everything is really, really mature, really, really tight, but not too expansive. And so for a variety of reasons. Ease of read. It's a lot easier to read than Goblet of Fire because it's so much shorter. People really, really enjoy it. They like the introduction of the different characters. People love to hate Peter Pettigrew, but he's a fantastically written character. Remus Lupin is introduced in this. Sirius Black is introduced in this. It's got a fantastic plot, and like I said, the themes overall, I think, is the overall consensus on why people like it so much. So yes, I think from an analytical standpoint, Prisoner of Azkaban is probably easily the best Harry Potter book. Let's go to a question from, or statement from Lana, who says, I'm just hopping in to tell you how much your audiobooks mean to me. Thank you so much for all your hard work. Well, thank you very much, Lana. I appreciate hearing words like that. I love hearing comments like that where people just really connect with my work through the works of these other authors that I really respect. So thank you very much. Sanjudy Saprova says, you should do some voice acting. You've got talent. Well, thank you very much. I have been working on some projects on the side, none of which I am in control of, and so I have no idea where they are in the editing process, but there are at least 3 projects that I've been a part of as a voice actor since starting this channel. So when those come out, or when those are in the late stages of post-production, I will let you guys know so you guys can head over to them. Dom DJ says, I absolutely love your audiobooks. They make my day. Well, thank you very much, Dom. Burgerbeth says, what is your favorite Percy Jackson ship? You already know the answer. It's your username. Infected Phantom says, I was listening to Trials of Apollo recently, and it was confusing to listen to because it takes place after Chalice of the Gods and kind of spoils a lot of it. Yeah, it's weird that he would write Trials of Apollo and then go back to Percy Jackson before Trials of Apollo when we already know everything that happens. And so I will start reading Trials of Apollo prior to the release of the 8th Percy Jackson book, because it won't be out until probably September of 25. But I won't read it on the channel until after Wrath of the Triple Goddess. And then, that being said, like, that's why I don't want to read Sun and the Star. You guys have been suggesting or requesting Sun and the Star for almost a year now. And I have been working through it, but I don't want to post it until after Trials of Apollo because of the fact that there are significant spoilers in Trials of Apollo and significant character demises and changes to the character dynamics that I don't want to spoil that by releasing Sun and the Star on the channel before you have had the chance or the opportunity to read Trials of Apollo. Let's see here. The Loop Raider says, I was listening to your audiobook of The Lost Hero when I saw you were live. Well, thank you for hopping over and joining. I appreciate it. Jalen says, I'm reading The Goblet of Fire and using your audiobooks on Patreon, and I love them. Well, thank you very much. Yeah, if you guys weren't aware, I do have Harry Potter in its entirety. I have all 7 books recorded. I also have the first book re-recorded in the British version. And I also have the Tales of Beetle the Bard and the first act of Harry Potter and the Cursed Child, as well as Quidditch Through the Ages over on Patreon, and then everything that I just listed except for Harry Potter and the Cursed Child over on Vimeo. So links to that should be in the description below. If they don't work, let me know. Perkabeth says, I read The Chalice of the Gods before Heroes of Olympus, so I was so confused, but now I'm currently listening to The Lost Hero on your channel. Yeah, I would definitely recommend not reading the 6th Percy Jackson book after the 5th one, because a significant amount of things happen between the 5th book and the 6th book. So if you can read through the entirety of Heroes of Olympus before Chalice of the Gods, it's definitely worth it, because it shows the maturity of the characters. Let's see here. Sanjudy Saprova says, favorite side characters? Good question. I really like the Canadians. They return in... the chapters aren't out yet, but they return in House of Hades, the Boreads or the Boreads from Quebec, and I really liked the voices that I did for them. So usually it has to do with the voices that I do for the characters, and so those are really fun for me. I really liked Garion and Eurytion from Battle of the Labyrinth. I liked them before I started narrating. That's one of my favorite scenes in the entire series. But I really enjoyed narrating it with the 2 separate Southern accents that I chose for the characters. Perkabest says, you're the reason I love the Percy Jackson and Heroes of Olympus. I wanted to know if I should start making audiobooks on my channel. It's totally up to you. It comes with heavy benefits and heavy risks, so it's totally up to you. Joseph Morrill says, be warned, his British accent is fire. Be warned that you will indeed love it. Well, thank you very much. That's why I actually re-recorded the first Harry Potter book, is I didn't have the accent not perfected, but I wasn't comfortable with the accent until about halfway through Chamber of Secrets. And so I was kind of disappointed with my work on the first 2 books, and I decided that I was at least going to re-record the first one. So that's why I recorded Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone after I recorded Deathly Hallows then. Feel free to keep asking questions in the chat. It looks like I'm caught up on my end. I am going to go to a question from Poutinery, who says, are you a voice actor? Yeah, I just answered a question in the chat. There are, not professional necessarily, unless you consider this professional voice acting, but there are 3 projects that I've worked on because of the channel that are by other production companies or by other users, and I am unaware of any release dates for any of them yet. They're still in the production phases. And so I will let you guys know as soon as those come out or are in post-production, so you guys can set your calendars for when they come out. AJ Girl says, do you know when you're going to release House of Hades? Yes. So the first half of House of Hades is already up on Patreon. I think today we did chapter 13 on the channel. So as soon as we're done with the first 36 chapters, I want to say... let me do some math here, or actually let me check my schedule, and I'll let you know exactly when those are scheduled to come out here. House of Hades, the first half is scheduled to come out on July 12th. So that's in about 2 weeks. And then the second half will be about 2 weeks after that. So the end of July, both halves should be out. If you want content in advance, about 2 weeks, feel free to check them out over on Patreon. It's as little as $3 a month. You get everything over there for $3 a month. Let's see here. Dom DJ says, bye, I'm off to listen to The Son of Neptune. Well, enjoy, Dom. Thank you very much. Allie Wilson says, hi, I really like the audios. Thank you very much, Allie. Rickerbest says, if you could have one book series to only read, what would it be? For me, it's Harry Potter. Percy Jackson is more expensive, but Harry Potter means a lot more to me from a nostalgic standpoint. It's what really got me into like long form literature when I was like 6 or 7 years old. So for me, it's Harry Potter. I love rereading Harry Potter. Casey Campbell says, why is Half-Blood Prince your favorite book? It's the last book at Hogwarts that is fully at Hogwarts. And so the maturity of the characters combined with the familiar atmosphere, I think, puts it up there for me. I love the side plots that are going on. I love the romantic interactions. I love the comedy of it. And I also love the very atmospheric world-building elements that have to do with Voldemort and with the Horcruxes prior to everything just kind of falling apart. That's why, like I said, I love right before that last act is usually my favorite. So right before everything falls apart, that's where we're at with Half-Blood Prince. So there's a variety of reasons, but those are kind of the basic ones. Infected Phantom says, a few weeks ago I mentioned a book called Project Hail Mary. I recently learned it's getting a movie adaptation. I will revisit that in my list and see if I can bump that up or find a spot for it on my shelf here. Perkabest says, if you could only read one Heroes of Olympus book, which one would it be? Oh, that's a tough question. My personal favorite is Mark of Athena. But the more I reread House of Hades, it is the best, in my opinion. It is the best book for me. For personal reasons, I will always love Mark of Athena more. So it's between those two, and I think just for personal reasons, I have to go with Mark of Athena. But if I were going from a just a purely book, like literary critique side of things, I would choose House of Hades. Let's see here. Joseph Morrill says, Half-Blood Prince was a heck of a book, man. It's also my favorite of the Harry Potter books. So my backstory with this is I was 6 years old the summer that it came out. I still have They used to release book posters. If you have a local Barnes & Noble, maybe they still put them on the outside of their buildings when books come out. I know they did it for Hunger Games when they came out a couple years ago. But when Half-Blood Prince came out in the summer of 2005, I got the book and I got the poster, having never read the books before. But it was such a big deal. It was arguably a bigger deal than Deathly Hallows. It was like the biggest book event ever. And so I got the book as a 6-year-old, having never read it before. My mom had read them all. That's why we got it. It was basically for her. And I really wanted to read it. But she's like, well, it's the 6th book, and it's probably not okay for you to read. But you can start reading the first book. And so the release of the 6th book is what got me into the first book. And so I always kind of had Half-Blood Prince in this position of reverence for me. And it lived up to all of my expectations and continues to live up to them. And just the quality of the story for me is fantastic. Let's see here. Sandstone says, when and why did you decide to read the Percy Jackson series? So the why for the channel, I've mentioned several times, and my long-term listeners will be aware of this, but for those of you that aren't aware, I started this channel about a year and a half ago. My wife was pregnant with my firstborn son, and I had a tire explode in my face. I was filling a tire in the winter, and it was freezing, and the tire exploded, and I basically almost lost the side of my face. And it kind of triggered this like almost legacy initiative inside me where I was like, well, if something were to actually happen to me, like I was lucky to get away from that unscathed. But if something were to happen to me, especially now with kids, what would I leave behind for them? And more importantly, would I leave behind the things that I treasured in my relationship with my own father? My dad's still alive. I shouldn't say had. But one thing that I really enjoyed when I was growing up is being able to read with my father. And so I wanted to create this just in case something were to happen for me, that I would have this to give to my children. So, if I were to die next year and my son grows up and he wants to read with dad, he always has the opportunity to read with dad. And I didn't know what to read at first. And so I just started going through like my favorite books from my childhood. So I started with Harry Potter. I started with the Hunger Games. I started with Percy Jackson. And now the channel has developed into what it is. It really, it sparked with the TV show. I kind of, like, I had the channel out for about a year, and then all of a sudden, like, one day my Percy Jackson, on the original channel, my Lightning Thief video went from 500 views to, like, I think it was something like 50,000 in a month. And by the time that the original channel was shut down, we had over 500,000 views on the Lightning Thief video, and that was all because of the TV show. So yeah, that's how the channel got started. That's kind of a really long-winded answer, but Perkabeth says, who's your favorite Percy Jackson character that's not Percy or Annabeth? Good question. Personally, Nico, honestly. Nico is my favorite character, but my favorite character to read for is either Frank or Leo. Leo is so much fun, and Frank, I do the accent, and I have a blast with the accent. So I actually have a question. Someone asked about my accent earlier, so I really enjoy doing those characters. I really like Hazel as a character too, but I would definitely say overall it's Nico, but to read is Frank and Leo. Joseph Morrill says he's converted to knowing that House of Hades is Pog. Yeah, House of Hades is very good. It's an unbelievably good book. Very well written. Sandstone says, if you were a half-blood, who would you want your parent to be? I've always felt drawn to Hades. I think it's the color scheme. I think it's the green and black and white and purple and all of that. I've always felt drawn to earth-based characters, or like under the earth-based characters. And so like I'm a big Avatar: The Last Airbender fan. I've always been an Earth Kingdom kind of guy. And I've always felt a similarity between Hades and that like earth-based mythology kind of thing, if that makes any sense. Infected Phantom says, when did you first read Percy Jackson? Right before the release of what's the 5th book called? Last Olympian. Last Olympian I have in hardcover. It was the first of the Percy Jackson books that I bought after its release. It was the first one I read the first 4 leading up to the release of The Last Olympian, and then I bought it as soon as it came out. So I've read every Percy Jackson book as soon as it came out after Last Olympian. So that was, I think, spring of 2009, if I'm not mistaken. Tarek Chahatu says, can you read ancient Greek? If you're asking if I can read Greek, no. If you're asking if I will read ancient Greek stories on the channel, then maybe. That is a common question. People ask me if I could read the Iliad and the Odyssey. It's on my list. It's not very high on my list for a variety of reasons, but in terms of can I read ancient Greek, I can probably pronounce some of the words reading-wise. I can do that with Russian and Cyrillic alphabets too, but I usually have no idea what the words mean. So yes and no to answer your question. Joseph Morrill says, wasn't there like a huge leak about certain characters passing when that book came out? Yes. So I think I can say this. It's, first of all, my rule with spoilers is if it's out on the regular channel for everybody, I'm usually comfortable talking about them. But this book came out almost 20 years ago, and if you aren't aware of the plot twist in Half-Blood Prince, you should be aware of it. So if you don't want to hear it, then maybe stop the video for about 5 minutes. But yes, so the big end of Half-Blood Prince is Snape kills Dumbledore. And obviously at the time we had no idea what his motivations were, but it was a huge deal because Dumbledore was kind of the god figure of the universe. Whenever Dumbledore was there, Harry was safe, and so now the safety net was gone. But when the book came out, there were, like, people knew that there was something major going to happen. Like, she foreshadowed it pretty heavily during the press tour. And so when the book came out, people were desperate to not just figure it out, but also spoil it. And so this was kind of the early days of, the mid days of like chat-based internet services and like the early days of Reddit type of stuff. And so people were chatting in chat rooms and posting to spoiler forums and that sort of thing. And the internet wasn't quite mobily accessible, if that makes any sense. But people would go to their local Barnes & Nobles, get the book, would literally be in the store as people were buying the book, would skip ahead, find the part where Snape kills Dumbledore, and shout it out in the store, and people were pissed. And so yeah, it was a huge deal. I don't know if it leaked beforehand, but it definitely leaked the moment that the books came out. People were literally screaming it to other people in the bookstores. Casey Campbell says, do you feel like sharing why Mark of Athena is meaningful? For me personally, so Mark of Athena came out in 2012, I think. So I would have been an 8th grader, and it was kind of like, for lack of a better term, it was kind of the emergence, or people always call their romantic or sexual awakenings. Like for me, it was I was really starting to get to the point in my life where I was looking for relationships. Like my early crushes were happening around the time of this book. And so having gone through the Percy Jackson series and, Percabeth specifically, now this was the book where they were together. You had all this time. They got together at the end of the Percy Jackson series, and then it was taken away from them for 2 books. And then Mark of Athena came out, and they're finally together. And so for me, as someone who was at the age where I was finally like maturing into these feelings for other people, like this was the book where I could put myself into the characters at the same time that things were happening in my own life. And so I was kind of able to bond with these characters more than I ever had before. And I really enjoy the plot. I really enjoy the locations in Mark of Athena. But for me, it's mostly due to the combination of the 2 sets of characters. Finally, we have the complete group. And so that's why I really love it. And then, of course, there's the cliffhanger at the end. Let's go to a question from Percabeth, who says, what's your favorite Percy Jackson book? Mine, personally, is Battle of the Labyrinth, by a pretty significant margin, even having just reread the series. Sandstone says, I've always felt drawn to Hades as well, and I love Avatar: The Last Airbender. Toph is my favorite character. I think Toph is a lot of people's favorite character. But yes, I'm a major Avatar fan. Happy to answer questions about Avatar. Excuse me. One thing that I haven't got around to reading yet, but would like to do on the channel eventually, is the FCE series. He's got 2 books about Kyoshi and 2 books about Avatar Yang Chen. I can't remember what the series itself is called, but the first book is called like The Rise of Kyoshi. And those are very, very good books, but I haven't had a chance to read them on the channel yet. Oh gosh, you're making me feel old. Me and Mark of Athena are the same age. Gosh, I feel really old. Mateo Bartholin says, hello this week. Hello. Nice to see you, Mateo. Joseph Morrill says, honestly, for me, it was House of Hades due to a lot of events that I won't say since it's not officially on the channel, but that's just why I love House of Hades just a bit more. Yeah, there are definitely... for me, it's the island scene. I won't spoil characters, but I really liked the stable scene when I was 13, and when I was 14, I really liked the island scene. So those are 2 of my favorite chapters in the entire series. Are chapter 13 from Mark of Athena, and chapter 50 through 52 of House of Hades have always been my favorite chapters in the entire series. Jacob says Son of Neptune has always been my favorite. I know a lot of people who have that opinion, and it's maybe it's not you, but I know a lot of people really like the change, the difference in Greek mythology versus Roman mythology, and then a lot of people who grew up with Percy Jackson really don't like Son of Neptune because of that. It's so different from what they're used to. But I know it's for most people, it's either you really love Lost Hero and really hate Son of Neptune, or really love Son of Neptune and hate Lost Hero. I'm not really sure which camp I'm in, to be honest with you. Sumera Hawage says, hey bro, well done on what you're doing. Wish you all the best in what you're doing. Thank you very much. Thanks for the audiobooks. It gives me a lot of comfort. I'm very happy to do so. Thank you very much for letting me know how you guys connect with these books. Any money I could ever make on the channel is nowhere near as rewarding to me as the kind words that you guys give me in comments like that. So I'm always happy to know how my work has affected you guys and impacted your experience with these stories. So thank you very much. Perkabest says, will you ever do a ride reading? I'm not sure I'm familiar with what you're asking. I will look it up and maybe add it to my list. Let's go to a question from Lu Jining, who says, where are your Harry Potter recordings? They are currently available for free. I cannot stress this enough. They are still available for free over on Patreon and Vimeo. So Vimeo, you don't need an account. You just go to vimeo.com, look up Echo Wirm. There should be a description or a link in the description of this video, and you can go check them out over there. On Patreon, you shouldn't need to create an account either. Everything is available for free in terms of Percy Jackson, or excuse me, in terms of Harry Potter. So if you guys are looking for my Harry Potter recordings, Patreon and Vimeo available for free. They're just not on YouTube. Question from Allie Wilson. I like the Percy Jackson books. What is your favorite god in the Percy Jackson books? Good question. I'm sure I've answered this before, and my answer is probably going to be different than before because it always changes. My personal favorite god or goddess in all of Greek mythology is Nike or Victoria. But in terms of the series, I really enjoy Apollo. He gets less likable in Trials of Apollo, but that makes a lot of sense. Favorite god or goddess? Ugh. Yeah, that's a tough question. That's a really tough question. I don't know, to be honest with you. Maybe Hades. I enjoy doing the accent. A lot of people think it's an Australian accent. It's not an Australian accent. It's a Steve Coogan impression from the Percy Jackson films, which is British, but I can see why you guys would think it's Australian. Perkabest says, I mean a live reading. Yes. So a couple of things. I have recorded about 3 or 4 live readings of me just with my face like this on camera reading the books. And 2 of those recordings are on series that are now I'm not able to read on the channel. So one was Harry Potter and one is Hunger Games, and I'm no longer allowed to read those for copyright purposes on the channel, and so they're available over on Patreon and Vimeo. But I don't know, I feel like I have kind of this worry. Sorry, my shirt is like bunching up. I have this worry that because two of my live readings have resulted in copyright warnings, that it's my live readings triggering it. And I know that's not true, but it's like a subconscious fear that if I do another live reading of Percy Jackson, then Percy Jackson's going to be the next one to go. So yes, eventually. I'm not sure what yet. I don't know if it'll be Percy Jackson. Question from Sandstone, who says, how many book series have you read? And what are some of the book series you're planning on reading? So which series have I done in full? Just Harry Potter? Not true. I am done with Harry Potter, and I am done with Spiderwick Chronicles. Those are the only two series that I have completed in full. What am I currently doing? Percy Jackson. All of Rick Riordan's other properties, so that includes like Magnus Chase and the Kane Chronicles. And then Game of Thrones, the whole A Song of Ice and Fire series. Two different Margaret Peterson Haddock series, so I have the first 3 books of the Shadow Children sequence out on the channel. There's 4 other ones that I have yet to record. And then she has an 8-part series called The Missing, which I am currently working my way through the first book. What else do I have here? Chronicles of Narnia. I have personally recorded the first 6. The 5th one is currently airing on the channel. The 6th one is currently airing over on Patreon. And then I will work on the 7th one as soon as I'm done with Hunger Games, I think. Hunger Games is another one. I've only read the first book of it on the channel. Eventually we'll read Divergent, The Maze Runner, Dune. We'll do a couple of them, probably not all of the Dune books. I have recorded the first one. I'm planning on doing at least the first 2. The Magic Treehouse series, Diary of a Wimpy Kid, A to Z Mysteries, Fablehaven, The Inheritance Cycle, The Rise of Kyoshi, and probably a few of the Series of Unfortunate Events. So there's a ton of them. If you check the playlist, there should be a ton of different options for you, and even more to come. Question from Casey Campbell, who says, who are your favorite Avatar The Last Airbender characters? Toph, probably for sure. Zuko, I think, is one of the best written characters ever in any medium. Who else? The Cabbage Merchant. Good question. Kyoshi is most people's favorite avatar. I would have to somewhat agree with that. I think Kyoshi is a very fun character, especially as you get into the books and know her backstory a little more. Let's go to a question from Jacob, who says, did you enjoy Trials of Apollo? I did. I found them difficult to get through with a new protagonist. And I know a lot of people have that same issue with The Lost Hero. But yes, Trials of Apollo is good. I don't think they're up to par with the other 2 series, in my personal opinion. If I had to rank Rick Riordan's series just off the top of my head, I would say Heroes of Olympus is probably Rick Riordan's best series. And then I would say it's Percy Jackson, very close second. A little below that, I'd say Kane Chronicles. Then I do Trials of Apollo and Magnus Chase, in my personal opinion. You guys are totally welcome to have different opinions than me. Frami Davis says, when your channel disappeared, I was so sad because I can't listen to anyone else. I want to say thank you. Well, thank you very much for following me over to the new channel and continuing to support my work. I'm very happy to do so for comments like that. I love doing what I do, and it makes it even better when you guys tell me stuff like that. So thank you very much. Infected Phantom says, how do you feel about Jason? In my opinion, he starts The Lost Hero seeming stronger than Percy, but he seems to get progressively weaker. So in terms of power set, I think he and Percy are close. I think there are a lot of variables that determine who would win in a fight. We see in the series that Percy wins, but I think in certain situations, it would probably be a 50-50 fight. However, as a character, I think Jason is one of the most boring characters in the series. Um, I'm a wrestling fan, and so I typically describe Jason in wrestling terms as a white meat babyface, which means that he is a protagonist who can do no wrong, who has no faults, who is basically he is boring because he's so plain. He's a less fun version of Percy. And so I've never really enjoyed Jason in the overall scheme of things, and I won't spoil anything, but he serves a greater purpose for the overall story and the progression of certain characters. But I personally do not like Jason as a character, and I don't like reading for him. You guys are welcome to have different opinions. I do apologize if you're a big Jason fan. Perkabest says, do you like Percy Jackson and the Olympians or the Heroes of Olympus better? For nostalgic purposes, Percy Jackson, but for quality purposes, Heroes of Olympus. I think Heroes of Olympus has more to offer, but Percy Jackson is more accessible, if that makes any sense. Jeff McJefferson says, I used to have a membership on your previous channel, but it seems like you are now only doing Patreon. Will memberships come back? Yes, but I don't know when. When we started the new channel, we were monetized for about 2 weeks, and then we lost monetization on the grounds of them not believing this is original content. We challenged that with an appeal, and they still rejected our appeal. And so we are not able to attempt to remonetize until August 4th. And so right now, the only way that I'm able to give you guys advanced paid content is through Patreon. If we ever get the option to have memberships back, I would love to do it. But at the moment, for the next month and a half or so, we don't have the option to have memberships. And so if you guys want advanced content, it's available over on Patreon for $3 a month. Perkabest says, if you could be in any Percy Jackson books but the Battle of the Labyrinth, which would it be? Good question. That is a really good question. Chalice of the Gods, probably, because the characters have a lot of fun with it. It's at the point where the series is starting to take itself less seriously, and it is more fun because of it. It's a lot more lighthearted than any of the previous books. It's a lot lower stakes, and it is more enjoyable for a variety of reasons because of that. But I know a lot of people do enjoy the stakes of just kind of the overall worldly threat of the other books, but Chalice of the Gods is really, really fun, and I would enjoy being a part of it. Joseph Morrill says, Blonde Superman, best stuff Percy has ever said. Yes. Yeah, Percy and Jason's interactions are interesting. Sandstone says, if you have watched the Percy Jackson series on Disney Plus, what do you think of the visuals portrayed in the show? So, in my personal opinion, and this is going to be a controversial opinion, I like the design of the camp and the design of the world better in the films. The show feels a little too Disney for me. And what I mean by that is every scene, for the most part, feels like it was filmed on a green screen. And the Disney After Effects were added, and the HDR filters were thrown on afterwards. And it feels like if I didn't know the characters, there would be nothing about Percy Jackson visually that would separate it from something like The Mandalorian, right? Like if I didn't know Percy Jackson and all of a sudden someone showed up with a lightsaber, I would feel like I was watching The Mandalorian. Because it's the exact same production team, it's the exact same set, it's the Disney feel. They Disneyfied it. I enjoy the show, and I thought the special effects looked great. My problem is that visually the show just looks like a Disney property. It just everything has that Disney shine to it that they've put up ever since they launched Disney Plus a few years ago. Joseph Morrill says Percy Jackson had films. If you're being ironic, then no. But yes, if you were unaware, yes, there were 2 films that were made in 2010 and 2013. But most fans try to ignore them and forget about them. And I feel like that's what you're asking. But I don't want to dissuade you from actually watching them if you want to watch them. There were a film made for The Lightning Thief and a film made for The Sea of Monsters. They're both terrible, but they look all right. Yeah, there we go. I agree on your opinion on how you feel about the Percy Jackson show. That's why I kind of disliked it a bit. I missed a question from Matteo Bartholan who says, when are you going to do Dragon Rider? It's on my list. I don't know if I'll get to it anytime soon. I'm definitely going to do Aragon before I do any other dragon type series. I know Wings, is it Wings of Fire is another dragon series that people have suggested. And actually, I shouldn't say that. Fablehaven will be before Aragon. But Aragon is up there. So I'm going to try not to do a ton of dragon stories at once, but I know fantasy is really big on this channel. And so I will try to give you guys as much content as you guys are asking for. Perkabest says, who is your favorite Aphrodite character? Mine is definitely Drew. Drew was I'm just kidding. It's got to be Selena Beauregard. I think Selena Beauregard is a very, very tragic character, a very well-written character, even though she doesn't show up for very long. Let's see here. Perkabest says, what are your opinions on Tristan McLean from The Lost Hero? I enjoy him. I think he's a great father figure to Piper. I don't know if I wish we got more of him. I think his story was pretty wrapped up in The Lost Hero. I'm more of a fan of his than I am of Piper. I know a lot of people hate Piper, and I know a lot of people love Piper. I'm kind of indifferent to Piper. She just kind of bores me in the same way that Jason bores me. Infected Phantom says, I was looking through Audible and I found a book called Stormrunner. It says presented by Rick Riordan. Does that mean he helped write the book or something completely different? No. So it's completely written by another person. And I can't remember which of the there are 2 or 3 series. One is Arabian mythology, one is Hispanic mythology, and a third one I can't remember. So Rick Riordan Presents is basically his way of saying, I didn't write this book, but this book probably won't make a ton of money unless I put my name on it. So someone else wrote it. It's very similar in tone. It's very similar in world to Rick Riordan's series. And one could even argue that they may take place in the same universe, but it's a different author. It's a different style of writing. It's a different set of characters, but Rick Riordan basically slapped his name on it so that it would sell better, if that makes any sense. Because when you're writing a mythology book, you're definitely going to want the guy who is known for being like the mythology writer to give his approval on your series. And so that's what he did for a variety of these series. Sandstone says, if you were a god, how would you respond to Percy's speaking outs and talking back? Smiting, probably, is the typical one. I like... Someone had a question about this, but Persephone and Demeter have a habit of turning people into flowers, and I think that's very funny. It happens in it happens in House of Hades. I can't remember his name. The god of farming does it too. Joseph Morrill says Selena was robbed. She deserved a happy ending. Yeah, it is a tragedy. What happens to Selena Beauregard? A very, very well written little story arc there. Jeff McJefferson says, I also found that I missed seeing Grover in the stories when he stopped being important at the end of the Percy Jackson series, and when he completely disappeared in Heroes. Any thoughts on that? Yeah, someone else asked me this, and it might have been you. So Grover is not integral to anything about the Heroes of Olympus, which some people understand and are okay with, and some people don't understand and aren't okay with, and some people understand but wish he was still there. Grover is a great character, but for the most part is used as comic relief. And so in terms of a storytelling element, when we get to Heroes of Olympus and we have characters like Leo and characters like Frank, we don't have a need for Grover. We already have a satyr with Coach Hedge. And what Coach Hedge allows is to give a different perspective on satyrs. And someone even mentions that because Grover appears in House of Hades, just briefly. He's still active at the camp. His story is completely separate from what's going on with the Heroes of Olympus. He's not necessary. And so I miss him, but I understand why he's not there, because he doesn't have to be there. There's no place for him to be there. His involvement is not integral to the story. And so what I do like, though, is they brought him back for Chalice of the Gods, because it makes sense why he'd be back in Chalice of the Gods. So those are kind of my generalized... Like, I miss him, but he's not necessary to the story. And I think his place is taken up by characters that I personally enjoy more than Grover. But I do enjoy having him back in Chalice of the Gods. Burgerbest says, who is your favorite in the Sea of Monsters, other than Percy and Annabeth? Yeah, it's absolutely Tyson. Tyson was so much fun to read for. He's got a great character art. Joseph Morrill says, watch us get a series of all these mythologies combining and fighting in a war. Like God games, but more complicated. Yeah, I could see that happening. I'm actually surprised he's never done it. He did a Kane, it's like a 4 little novella crossover between the Kane Chronicles and Percy Jackson, and it's never mentioned again. It's never mentioned in the Kane Chronicles. It's never mentioned again in Percy Jackson. There is, like, this book does not exist outside its own self. This little, like, 4-piece novella that he wrote. There is very little crossover with Magnus Chase and Percy Jackson. Even though Annabeth appears at the beginning of Magnus Chase, there's very little crossover between the two. And in terms of the other series that he has sponsored, they're like no correlation whatsoever. So it's very interesting. Jeff McJefferson says, I definitely agree. I do miss the other characters, like you said Karen here, but you said others from camp, and I think you mean Chiron. So Karen is the ferry driver from the underworld, but Chiron is the camp director, or the you know what I'm talking about, the centaur from camp that we don't see much of anymore. Yeah, I miss him. He does reappear. So he does reappear in the other series. So he's significantly in Sun and the Star. He's significantly in Chalice of the Gods, and I think he appears quite a few times in Trials of Apollo. Let's see here. Perkerbest says, what do you think of Reyna? I enjoy Reyna. I don't enjoy her as a love interest for Jason. I think her story is mostly in the whole not being in love with Jason not being in love with her sort of thing. I think she's a very strong character. I think she's been dealt a really, really bad hand her entire life, and so I'm sympathetic to her, and I think she deserves the best. Sandstone says, if you could open any book in the Magic Treehouse series, where would you go? Or any book, sorry, in the Magic Treehouse, where would you go? Oh boy, good question. My personal favorite book in the Magic Treehouse series is probably Carnival at Candlelight. So maybe that one, the Venice book, but there's honestly, I have no idea. There are so many really, really solid experiences that you could have in the Magic Treehouse books that I honestly can't give an answer to that because there's over 50 options. Perkerbest says, were you upset when Tyson stopped showing up in the series? Not really. I thought his arc was complete. It's fun to see him every once in a while. But I don't think he has a lot to offer the rest of the series the way the rest of them do, if that makes any sense. Perkerbest says, if you could pick between Chiron and Coach Hedge, who would you pick? Coach Hedge is more fun, but Chiron, you'd get stuff done a lot more efficiently. And I like to be efficient more than I like... Well, I shouldn't say that. I don't know. Personally, I'd pick Chiron, but Coach Hedge has his benefits. Joseph Morrill says, everyone forgets that for a single line in Son of Neptune, where it mentions Grover slightly. What specifically are you referring to? Because you're right. Hold on one sec. I'm just reading back here. Yeah, clarify what you're saying there. What specifically are we forgetting? Casey Campbell says, will you read the novella with the crossover? Yes. I don't know when. So right now, I'm kind of in my free time trying to work my way through the side books. Right now, I'm working my way through Camp Jupiter Classified. I've already done the Demigod Files. I'm also working on the Demigod Diaries. I still have yet to read the Greek gods and Greek heroes. Those are going to be really long, but I'm going to try to do all the short ones, including the crossover novella. I have no idea when I'm going to get to it, though. Why is the Cabbage Merchant your favorite character? He's not. I was kind of being ironic. I do enjoy every time he shows up, though. Oh, yes. Joseph Morrill says the empathy link. Yeah, so it's not clear as to why the empathy link doesn't work, and I actually had a question from this pre-prepared. But it's mentioned in, like you said, that line in Son of Neptune that the link is disturbed or there's something blocking it, and it's presumed to be Hera. You could also argue that it might be Gaia, but we're almost certain that it's Hera causing it, and we don't know when it's going to come back together. And for the life of me, I can't remember if it's back in Chalice of the Gods or not. I can't remember if it's still there. If you could pick any of the dead demigods, who would it be to bring back from the dead? Bianca. Let's go to a question from Mia, who says, why are the chapters in House of Hades so short? That's a good question. Part of it is Rick Riordan started this thing, right? So in Lost Hero, every 2 chapters are a different narrator. And then by the time we get to Mark of Athena, it's every 4 chapters. And so in creating this system where he has to do 4 chapters and only 4 chapters for each character before moving on to the next thing, he has to balance 4 chapters of one character, have enough content for that character to go through, or enough or as little content for that character to go through, and still have that fit in an overall like story progression. So you can't have like a major thing happen to one character and then comedy happen unless it makes sense in the progression of the story. So he kind of doomed himself with that. And one of the downsides of that is sometimes Percy has literally 2 pages where he's just thinking about something because Rick Riordan needed a 4th chapter. And so the book isn't that much longer than Mark of Athena, but it's got like almost twice as many chapters. And so in doing that, then he has to shorten the length of the chapters. And so yeah, a chapter day for you guys is kind of screwing you guys over if the chapters are shorter. So blame the author, not me. Thank you. Joseph Morrill says, my theory is that because Hera is, well, yeah, we all love Hera, don't we? Perkabest says, why would you pick Bianca? I really like Bianca. I thought she was a character that I wanted to see more of. That is my only answer. I don't have a lot to add to that. In what book does Annabeth fall into Tartarus? That is the cliffhanger at the end of Mark of Athena. Let's go to a question from Dax Black. 2 questions here. One says, I thought 2 demigods having a kid makes a regular mortal. Not specifically. And we see that a bit in New Rome. It's mentioned in Son of Neptune and specifically in Camp Jupiter Classified. And I can't remember what they call them specifically. Let me see if I can find it real quick. Legacies. So these are, you don't see them with the Greeks, and there's a reason for that. And they mention that in Son of Neptune. So the legacy Greeks are typically killed almost immediately because of the fact that they aren't allowed in Camp Half-Blood, because Camp Half-Blood specifically is only for demigods, and not their children and not them as adults. And so it's very rare for a child to either know of their powers and survive, or there's a variety of things. Son of Magic is another story. It's from the Demigod Diaries that we'll talk about, where it has to do with a legacy character. But legacies are basically the descendants of demigods. So they still have godly blood in them, and they still have powers, but they're not necessarily as significant as demigods, and they're often looked upon as less than demigods, but they're still active in something like the Legion, the Roman Legion. Sometimes they're just regular mortals, though, as far as I'm aware. The other question was, didn't Frank already burn the stick? So yes, but not entirely. So the whole thing is Frank's life is tied to the stick that is given to him by his grandmother, and then he gives it to Hazel for protection. And so if the stick burns out completely, like if the stick is turned completely to ash, Frank will die. And so Frank's life force is tied to this stick. If they wrap it up, then he suffocates. If it is underwater, then he basically drowns. And so Hazel has to keep it safe and keep it from burning. So yes, it did burn because he needed it to burn at one point for part of his mission, but he didn't let it burn entirely. And so that's how he's still alive. Let's go to a question from... or a comment from Sandstone, who says, I love your voice for Blackjack. If you could have any pet that a half-blood owns, which would it be, such as Mrs. O'Leary? Mrs. O'Leary would be my choice. I grew up with a Newfoundland, and so I love big dogs, I guess, for lack of a better term. Trying to think what else. Buford the Table would be a fun pet. Yeah, Blackjack would be up there. I'd prefer if they couldn't speak. I think that adds a weird dynamic to it, but I would say Mrs. O'Leary is probably my go-to. Give me 1 sec, everybody. I have to go to... I'm just going to check something. Feel free to keep asking questions in the chat. I got to look something up real quick. If I go to... Oh, where are my live analytics here? I should have added moderators before I did this. But if I go here and I go to the live chat, I will go right there. Okay, perfect. Sorry about that. Question from Perkabeth, who says, does Estelle ever show up in the series? She's Percy's little sister. So, yes and no. So, Sally is pregnant with Estelle at the end of Chalice of the Gods. And so she doesn't exist prior to Trials of Apollo, really, unless, of course, she's born in the later books, which we don't know about. So yeah, she exists, not really, if that makes any sense. She's introduced in Chalice of the Gods, kind of, from a, yeah, you know what I mean. Jeff McJefferson says, when Frank's grandmother's house burns down, we see the bird fly away, but I don't remember seeing any closure on that. Did I miss something, or is it all he wrote for that character? As far as I can remember, she doesn't show up anywhere else later in the series. And so it's kind of... It's ambiguous, because we're not clear whether she survived or whether this is symbolic of her soul leaving. And so one could argue that this ties into resurrection mythology with Eastern cultures, and kind of giving credence to the fact that the Greek and Roman gods aren't the only gods to exist in this world. We know that like, canonically, there are other gods that exist in this universe. At one point, and I don't want to get ahead of myself, but at one point, I think someone mentions that... No, I remember what it is. So, it's not up on the channel yet, but Demigod Files, right? That's the Percy Jackson, like, side book. The sequel to that, for Heroes of Olympus, I do apologize for my shaking camera. Give me 1 sec. I'm trying to balance a stack of books on my arm. The sequel to that is called Demigod Diaries. Now, Demigod Diaries ends with a 60-page story by Haley Riordan, who is Rick Riordan's son and the person that Percy Jackson is based off. So it's called Son of Magic. It is about a legacy Greek character and a mentor that he finds. And this child is a descendant of Hecate. And actually, I lied. I think he's son of magic. Yeah, he's a son of Hecate. In this short story, which, keep in mind, is not written by Rick Riordan, is written by Rick Riordan's son, and is technically canon, there is a line in this book that implies that God exists, like the Christian God exists, and has higher authority than the Greek gods, which is very interesting. And I would be more than happy to talk about it in a later video, because off the top of my head, I wouldn't be able to find the direct line. But the mentor character in this book approaches Hecate and asks who she prays to. And she implies that she's praying to a god greater than the Greek gods. And because of the setting in a church, Haley Riordan is implying that the Greek gods submit to at least a god, like a singular monotheistic god, as a higher power, which is very interesting. It's a very weird line to put in a book, and it's very weird that Rick Riordan would allow this to be canon. So, interesting. Anyways, the question was about Frank's grandmother and the resurrection. We don't know. She never appears again. So it's very likely that she died, and this was symbolic of her escaping and dying of old age elsewhere, and leaving the family behind. And so there isn't a concrete answer to that, but I think there's a lot of thematic elements to it. Jeff McJefferson says Festus is the coolest answer for a choice of a demigod pet until he breaks. Yeah, that's a good point. I've never really thought of Festus as a pet, which is weird because I considered Buford the Table a pet. But yeah, Festus would also be a good choice. I'm not going to answer any questions on character arcs and Trials of Apollo because of the fact that it's not up on the channel. But if you DM me, I'd be more than happy to do so on like Discord or Patreon. Sandstone says, after the 5th book in the Percy Jackson series, which books would be best to read in order after that? I would go straight to Lost Hero. If for whatever reason you can't stand the fact that Percy's not in it, then skip Lost Hero and go to Son of Neptune. But I think it's fairly integral to your understanding of Chalice of the Gods and Trials of Apollo if you read the entirety of Heroes of Olympus. So right after Last Olympian, I would go to the Lost Hero. Jacob says, did they ever expand on that short story? I remember reading it and being intrigued. Yes. No. I don't believe they've ever mentioned anything beyond that. I could be. I'm gonna research it for you because I can't give an honest answer. But as far as I know, that is the only work that Haley Riordan has ever put into this series, and nothing from it has been extremely expanded upon, which is interesting. I don't think Rick Riordan would write a follow-up because it's his son's work and he would want his son to get credit for it. But yeah, I'll look into that. Sandstone says, would you want to be a half-blood that cannot see through the mist that well or be able to fully see through the mist such as a mortal, such as Rachel Elizabeth Dare? Personally, I would rather be the first one for the kind of concept of passive blindness, if that makes any sense. Like, if I don't know something's wrong, then nothing's wrong kind of thing. Jeff McJefferson says, Kyron also said that God with a big G was another matter in The Lightning Thief, so maybe alluding to the Christian God. Yeah, when I first read that in The Lightning Thief, I kind of thought it was just a passive, just like, oh yeah, we're not going to talk about God here, that sort of thing. But contextualized against the line in Son of Magic, yeah, it definitely gives it a new flip, if that makes any sense. Isabella says, I'm almost done with The Mark of Athena. Yeah, it's a good book. So the first 13 chapters of House of Hades are up. I do apologize that it's not up in its entirety. I still haven't finished it yet. So the first half is available over on Patreon if you have the ability to do so. Isabella says, who's your favorite character? My favorite character in Mark of Athena is probably Nico D'Angelo. In the book specifically, my favorite character is probably Percy. Let's go to a question from Sweaty Smalls, who says, what is your favorite series to read? Good question. I enjoyed doing Artemis Fowl because I did the Irish accent for it. Artemis Fowl is up on the channel, the first book, if you guys are interested in listening to that. I did the entire thing narrated in an Irish accent. And all the characters have various accents, whether they be Irish or British or whatever. But so that was fun for me. I typically prefer narrating in a British accent. It allows me to get into character more, if that makes any sense. It's a lot harder for me to jump from an American accent to a British accent than British to other British accents. If I'm already doing an accent, then it's easier for me to jump between voices. Whereas if I'm narrating in my normal voice, it is hard for me to jump between character voices. So Game of Thrones is enjoyable for me to read. Narnia is very enjoyable for me to read. Harry Potter was. I say was, and it makes me really sad because I'm done with Harry Potter. Except for Cursed Child, but I'm not in any rush there. Perkabest says, do you like Leo or Frank better? Leo as a character, Frank as a role, as a narrating role. Sandstone says, what would be the first thing you would do if you had the abilities Nico had? Shadow travel, and then take a really big nap. Sounds very appealing to me. personally. Let's go to a question from Wine Dude, who says, I didn't know that Spiderwick Chronicles is a book series. I've only watched the movie. Is there any audiobook available? Yes. So the first 4 of the 5 books are available on the channel. The next one comes out tomorrow? If not tomorrow, then Saturday. Sometime this weekend, it will come out, the 5th one. So if you want to read through the first 4, they're up on the Spiderwick playlist. It is a film, and it's also a very, very bad TV series that just came out. They tried to revive it, and apparently it did really, really bad. I haven't watched it yet. Sandstone says, if you drank ambrosia, what do you think it would taste like? For me personally, it would probably be my mom's cookie dough or a really, really good steak. But that's me personally. Everyone has their own opinion, so I can't answer for you. Perkabest says, who's your favorite character in The Lost Hero? Leo, pretty significantly. Oh, that's not true. Zethes is my favorite character in The Lost Hero. Cal is a close second, and then it's Leo. Question from Saber, who is asking, similar to that, what we talked about with the empathy link. Can Grover feel Percy's despair while in Tartarus? As far as we know, no, because the empathy link is not working when Percy's in Tartarus. And even if it was, it's arguable that he would not be able to feel it because it's the underworld, not the overworld. And I'm trying to remember if Percy can feel Grover in The Lightning Thief. So that's a good question, but no, he can't. Be interesting if he could, but yeah, everything points to the fact that he cannot. Jeff McJefferson says, I see you have a Minnesota State flag on the wall. Are you from Minnesota? Yes and no. I grew up in North Dakota, but I also grew up in and around Minnesota, so I'm very familiar with Minnesota. The reason I have a Minnesota flag behind me is partially soundproofing, but also if you guys are familiar with vexillology, the study of flags, whatever, Minnesota just got a new flag. And so this is the old one, and I can't display it anymore because it's the old flag, and I didn't know what to do with it. So old flags, or flags that like I can't fly for like political reasons, I usually have around me for soundproofing reasons. So yeah, I have Minnesota behind me. Obviously you see my mini flag collection here. The flag in front of my house right now is the flag of Bedfordshire. And people ask me this all the time. I own about 170 different flags. Are you a Milwaukee Bucks fan? I am. I used to have the Milwaukee Bucks flag behind me. Now it's in front of me for soundproofing purposes. But yes, this candle over here holding up these flags says, smells like a Bucks win. And it is designed to smell like the Fiserv Forum, which is really cool. So yes, not from Minnesota, grew up in and around Minnesota, and I'm a Wisconsin sports fan. Short answer. Perkabest says, you should read Long Live the Pumpkin Queen. I'll consider it. Let's go to a question from Big R, who says, why hasn't Rick brought up Grover in the Heroes of Olympus? Yeah, so we were kind of talking about this earlier. He's not integral. Like, Octavian is not really that integral. Reyna is kind of integral. Reyna's kind of like this side 9th character. So we have the 7, and then we have Nico, and then we have Reyna. And then we have all kind of these side characters doing their own thing. One of them is Octavian, one of them is Rachel, one of them is Grover. So Grover is playing his part, but it's not a major part. And even if it was a major part, it's not integral to the story of the 7. And so he's there in New York, playing a little part. We see him every once in a while. But his role is not necessary to what is going on with the 7. And so he's kind of removed from that. Jacob says, you're a Packers fan too? I'm going to Green Bay for a game this year for the first time. Well, enjoy. Lambeau Field is... I am biased, but even if I were to remove myself from a biased perspective, I think Lambeau Field is well and above the greatest experience that you will ever have as a football fan of any stadium. And I've been to about half of them. Lambeau Field is the capital of American football. So do enjoy yourself. It's a fantastic place. Definitely check out Titletown while you're there. My wife and I have gone several times. We went last year for the Chargers game. But yes, I am a Packer fan. Sandstone says, what is your favorite ship in any of the Percy Jackson series? Mine is Percabeth, or Percabeth, however you want to pronounce it. Percabeth or Percabeth says, do you like Piper or Jason? Between those two, I definitely prefer Piper. I think she has issues as a character, and I understand why people don't like her. And I personally am just kind of bored by her. But that's like it's a personal thing. It's not like a writing thing. And Jason for me is a writing thing. Jason is a boring character for me. Let's go to a question from Jeff, who says, when are you going to post House of Hades? I think I went over this earlier. The 12th, I think, is the release date for the first half. So in about 2 weeks' time, the first half will be out on the channel. And then 2 weeks after that or so, the second half will be out on the channel. So every 2 weeks to 3 weeks, you get the full first half or second half of each of these books. Basically just whenever we get through all the chapters. So it's a chapter a day. Low Shadow says, can you read the Heroes of Olympus Demigod Files? Demigod Files is the Percy Jackson version, but if you're referring to Demigod Diaries, which is the Heroes of Olympus version, then yes, I'm currently working my way through it. It should be up on the channel in the next month or so. Haley Rosales, I think I'm confused by the question. How do you feel about the new character Allison for the Percy Jackson show? Allison for the new Percy Jackson show. Am I missing some? Let me, hold on. Yeah, so this is a new character for season 2. I don't know anything about it. I haven't done a ton of research. I did hear about it. I just want to make sure I knew what you were talking about. So there's a new character that's going to be introduced in the second season of the show. But we know nothing about her. We know literally nothing about her. There is just going to be a new character for the show called Allison. So I don't know anything. And this, your question kind of plays into my opinions on the show. My opinion on the show is that the first season was good, but I'm very worried about the future of the show. I think the show is going to deviate significantly from the source material. And in the ways that have been displayed to me so far, I don't think that's a good thing. I have made my opinions on the casting clear in the past. I have no issues with the casting of the characters. My issue with Annabeth specifically is that she's written very different from her book counterpart. Her motivations are completely different. She kind of lacks the opinions on Luke that she does in the books. She is present for Luke's betrayal in the show, which is not the case in the books, and that causes significant conflict between her and Percy. So I'm worried about the future of the show for a variety of reasons. And I have no reason to be worried about this Allison character, but it's obviously a change from the books. And so we'll see going forward how it plays into the overall series. So Percabeth says, you should read Goddess Girls. I'll definitely check it out. Pooja Manakandan says, when did Nico turn into a dandelion? Yeah, so this is a line in the Demigod Files, which is the, like we just mentioned, the Percy Jackson side book. Nico mentions that the last time he was in Hades' palace, Persephone turned him into a dandelion. We never see it happen. So it's implied to take place between the events of Titan's Curse and Battle of the Labyrinth. At some point, Nico goes down to meet his dad, and he pisses off Persephone, and Persephone turns him into a dandelion. And that's all we know about. So it's kind of a one-off haunting thing. But it is interesting that he mentions that because he does then get turned into a corn plant in House of Hades. So at least 2 points in this series, Nico has been turned into a flower, which is very interesting. And he actually references it in Sun and the Star. Jeff McJefferson says, do you play any video games? And if so, have you played Hades? I found it to be a similarly refreshing take on Greek mythology. Not typically. I've mentioned this before. I'm not a big gamer. I just don't typically have time for it. But I am aware of Hades and have heard of it and have heard very good things. I've never played it personally. Isabella says, do you read books on Webtoon? No, I do not. If it wasn't obvious by the flipping of pages in my recordings, I typically read all of the physical copies of the books, and I've never been on Webtoon, but I will definitely check it out if that's something you are suggesting. Sandstone says, I've noticed that in the movies and shows that have been made for the Percy Jackson series, they over-reveal the love and stuff for the fans between Percy... Yes, if I'm reading your question correctly, they definitely over-hint at it compared to where it is in the books. In the books, the romance angle really doesn't show up until the end of Sea of Monsters and arguably not to the beginning of Titan's Curse, but in the show we definitely saw elements of it starting in the first season. Let's go to a question from Liam Salako, who says, can you do Percy Jackson Series 2? If by Percy Jackson Series 2 you mean Heroes of Olympus, then yes. The first 3 books are out in their entirety on the channel, in the Camp Half-Blood folder, and the 4th one is currently airing daily on the channel. So we have the first 13 chapters of the 4th book up on the channel as well. My Mayflower says, any chance of getting the last 2 Narnia books posted? The 5th one is currently airing on the channel, so as soon as the 5th one is up in all of the chapters, then the full version will be up on the channel, and then we're going to do Dune, and after Dune, then we will start Silver Chair. So Silver Chair is currently doing a daily chapter over on Patreon, and then as soon as we're done with that, we'll do Hunger Games, and then after Hunger Games, then we'll do Last Battle. So if you're following my logic here, it's Voyage of the Dawn Treader, and then we'll skip Narnia and go to Dune. We'll do Dune, get done with Dune, then we'll do Silver Chair. Once we're done with Silver Chair, then we'll do Hunger Games. Once we're done with Hunger Games, then we will do Lost Hero. So we're going kind of every other is a Narnia book, and then we'll finish the series. Let's go to a question from Sanjay Kumar, who says, when will the unreleased chapters be available? Every day a new chapter comes out of each of these books. So if you can do the math, I mean, however many chapters are left, it'll be that many days pretty much until the book is completed. Kendall says, why is Hades Australian? He's not. He might come across that way. It's a southeastern British accent based on the fact that in the film version of Percy Jackson, Hades was played by Steve Coogan, who you might recognize as the Roman centurion from Night at the Museum. A very recognizable British accent. And my attempt at imitating him as Hades is what you see, and most people mistake as an Australian accent on the channel. So I do apologize if it comes across as too Australian. I was definitely shooting for more of a Steve Coogan impression. Rockstar says, Chiron said that the magical barrier had been protecting Camp Half-Blood for hundreds of years, but hasn't it only been a thing since Talia was slain atop the hill? Yes and no. So the barrier has always existed. As early as Camp Half-Blood arrived in the United States, which is implied to be either end of the 18th century or early 19th century, the border has always existed. But the border has not always been a strong border. It's not always been like a literal magical fence. And so when they got to Camp Half-Blood, them being Luke and Talia and Annabeth, when they got there, we're not entirely sure that the border would have stopped what was chasing them. But and this is why they have guards at the camp. But when Talia died, Zeus used her life source to reinforce the border. So basically built the wall, for lack of a better term, and created a magical barrier that was significantly stronger than the barrier that was there. Of course, when she is poisoned, or the tree is poisoned, then they have to get the golden fleece to fix the pine tree, to fix the border. because the border still exists, but creatures are coming through. That's what we see at the beginning of Sea of Monsters. And then at the end of Sea of Monsters, when Talia's revived, then we still have the border, just without the life force. So, yeah, it's interesting. It's kind of a yes and no answer. The border was there, but it wasn't a literal magical wall. It was just kind of a protection. It had spells to keep mortals away. It was protected from the elements. It's always been like weatherproof. But in terms of monsters being able to breach the barrier, they would be able to. But now with the addition of the life force and then the enhanced golden fleece, the camp becomes a literal wall. Jeff McJefferson says, is Chalice of the Gods good, or does it feel more like fan service? Both. It is very tasteful fan service. I expected to hate it. I went into reading it with a negative attitude. And by the end of the book, I was very happy I had read it. The stakes are very low. The character development is very good. And it feels like a worthy successor to the Percy Jackson series. I very much enjoyed it. I'm very much looking forward to the remaining 2 books. I would highly recommend it. Obviously, my version of it isn't coming out until August, but I enjoyed it. It's very fan servicey. It calls back to a significant number of events in the first series, but it doesn't, at least in my opinion, it didn't feel heavy-handed. I enjoyed it. Jeff McJefferson says, the camp would have had to have been formed in the 1800s because the Greek demigods were involved in the Civil War, I thought. Yes. It wasn't created for the Civil War. As far as I remember. It would have been beforehand. It's not clear who was on which side, but it is mentioned several times in Heroes of Olympus that the Civil War occurred coincidentally alongside a war between the Greeks and the Romans. And so both camps existed by that time. If I remember correctly, the language in the first few Percy Jackson books imply that when the American colonies were founded, or when America was founded, that's when the Greek gods shifted from London, which had been their capital prior to America, and moved then to New York to reestablish Mount Olympus. So whenever that happened, whether it be at the birth of the United States in 1776, whether it be before that with the British colonies, or whether it be just after that with something like the War of 1812, but prior to the Civil War, that's when the camp would have been founded. So sometime arguably between the 1720s and 1860s, the camp would have been founded. Oliver Finstead says, yo, how's it going? Nice to see you, Oliver. Happy to have you here. Joseph Morrill says, if I had 3 wishes, I'd just use them all to finally get a good and mostly perfect Percy Jackson live action, or at least a good rendition for the books. In my opinion, we're never going to get that unless it's animated. I mentioned a couple live streams ago, I would love to see an animated version of Percy Jackson along the lines of Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, with the art style of the Heroes of Olympus graphic novels. The graphic novels are fantastic in their art design. And I would love to see an animated version of Percy Jackson with that similar art style or something close to it. Let's go to a question from Cindy, who says, can you please do the Wings of Fire series? Yeah, I mentioned earlier I am going to do Fablehaven and Aragon, and then eventually we'll get to like Dragon Rider and Wings of Fire. There's a lot of Dragon series that people want me to read, and I don't want to have only Dragon series on the channel. So I will get to it eventually, I promise. But right now, my focus is getting through Percy Jackson, and then doing some of these smaller series like Hunger Games, and then going on with the stuff that you guys have been requesting. So thank you guys for being patient with me. Losing my voice here. Let's see here. Sandstone says, do you think anything dangerous could have or have been in the Lotus Casino? I'm not entirely sure what you're asking. The Lotus Casino itself is already dangerous. If you're implying monsters in the Lotus Hotel and Casino, my answer would be no. because I think that the casino itself is very, very well protected. But the hotel itself and the Lotus Eaters that live there are very dangerous themselves. So exterior forces, no, in my opinion. Joseph Morrill says, did you know that Warner Brothers is awful? Yeah, well, yes, I did know that. Because they teased a Batman Beyond movie made by the same team of the Spider-Verse and then just canned it. I guess they just hate money. That, or they needed an excuse to... It's confusing, but it's the exact same reason that they would shelve the Batgirl movie. They have to make so many of these properties, or at least announce them, and put money toward them a certain year for tax breaks, and they don't even have to release them. So if they don't release a movie, they get a significant amount of tax breaks, and so that's why a lot of these movies go unreleased or put in the vaults. Jeff McJefferson says, how often do you do live streams? Is it a set schedule? I try to do every other Thursday. It's not always the case that I can do every other Thursday, and so I usually announce, like, hey, I have to move it to Tuesday this week. But for the most part, it's going to be every other Thursday, which today would mean, let's see here, 4th of July is next Thursday, and then, if I did the math correctly, 11th. So July 11th will be our next one. Happy Canada Day weekend to all of my Canadian listeners, and happy 4th of July week next week to all of my American listeners. Pergabest says, what's your Starbucks order? Yes, this is a question every week, and it's okay because I drink it every single week. Mine is the Venti Strawberry Aussie Refresher with lemonade, but I get it without berries because I don't like wet berries in my drink. And then they have a habit of putting too much ice in it, so I also do light ice. Joseph Morrill says, that's a loaded question. It is literally just that one drink. I worry for Echo's health. I'm okay. I'll do all right. I'm underweight. That's the only thing that I'm worried about health-wise. But yeah, I do drink a lot of Aussie refreshers. Jackson Buchanan says, hi in the chat. Nice to see you, Jackson. Chad Fly says, how many people did Harry witness dying in the Harry Potter series? I honestly don't know. If I think about it off the top of my head, you could argue that he witnesses his parent, at least his mother. I don't think he remembers his father dying. So his mother, arguably Quirrell. Then let's see here. No, that's not true. That's not true. Because if you're using the logic of he never saw the Thestrals, then the first person that he would actually see die is Cedric Diggory. So Cedric, Sirius, kind of, not really, kind of. Who else dies in front of him? He never sees Hepzibah Smith die. He sees Frank Bryce die. He does, but that's a good question. It's a trick question because he does, but he doesn't on a lot of these characters. I would say at least 7, if I think correctly, but don't ask me to name them. Jackson Buchanan says, you helped me get back into books. Well, thank you very much for letting me know that. My goal here is to allow people, one of my goals here, I should say, is to allow people the ability to experience these works that I thoroughly enjoy and thoroughly recommend and want. Please go out and buy these books. Because I wouldn't make any money off of it, but these authors deserve the respect and praise of their works. My goal here is to get you guys into these works. And if you guys can't experience them, whether it be you can't read or a variety of reasons, whether it be disabilities or time, that you don't have the ability to read, my goal is to get you into these books. So thank you for letting me know that. Oliver Finstead said, last stream you said to look out for the blood and cheese scene in House of the Dragon, and now that I have seen it, I must say, yup, it was messed up. If you're watching the show, it's a lot worse in the books. It's a lot worse in the books. A lot of people who have read Fire and Blood and watched the blood and cheese scene in House of the Dragon were disappointed because it is significantly less graphic, and it was still pretty graphic. So yeah, it's an experience. Yeah, Blood and Cheese is, for those of you that aren't aware, Blood and Cheese is to House of the Dragon and Fire and Blood what the Red Wedding is to Game of Thrones. It's kind of the big, holy crap, what the heck just happened scene. So yeah, it's that was the end of the first episode of season 2 of House of the Dragon. We'll talk a little bit about House of the Dragon a little later on here if you guys want to. Let's go to a question from Lavender Coconut, who says, is there another platform we can listen to your readings of the Hunger Games books besides YouTube? Yes. So Hunger Games and Harry Potter are currently not on YouTube, and probably won't return. And it's very likely that once we do Game of Thrones and Lord of the Rings, that they will also not be able to be on YouTube. So we'll put those over on Patreon for free and Vimeo for free. So links to both are in the description below if you guys want to check those out. All of those, like I said, are available for free. You shouldn't need memberships to access them. Roby says, are you going to read The Way of Kings? I've never read it, but I have it on my list, and am interested to see how it holds up in comparison to something like Fablehaven. There are a lot of fantasy books written by Mormon authors that I'm very curious to see if there are similarities between them or how they play into just kind of the theology of the Church of Latter-day Saints. Jackson Buchanan says, what is your favorite book? Currently, my favorite book is A Storm of Swords by George R.R. Martin, which is the third book in the Game of Thrones series, or the Song of Ice and Fire series. Jeff McJefferson says, have you read any of Tolkien's books? And if so, what did you think of the movie adaptations? Yes, The Hobbit is my favorite Tolkien book. The Hobbit is not my favorite Tolkien movie. The Lord of the Rings movies are arguably some of the best adaptations ever made. Hobbit, not so much, but that's for a variety of reasons we don't have to get into right now on a live stream. But yes, I have read all of Tolkien. Not all of Tolkien, obviously, but I have read the big five, I guess you could say. The Hobbit, the three Lord of the Rings books, and the Silmarillion. And I'm a huge fan of the original film series. Jeff Buchanan says, what's your favorite book in Percy Jackson? I've said it several times, and for the life of me, I'm spacing out right now. Battle of the Labyrinth. Let's go to a question from Black Dove, who's a member of my Patreon, and I have no idea how to pronounce their names because it's just a bunch of emojis. But we'll go with Black Dove for now. What is your favorite Percy Jackson book and why? Is it a specific scene or character or what? So the reason that I love Battle of the Labyrinth is it's kind of the last big quest book before we get to the finale of the original series. And so the characters are their most mature on their quests. The stakes are very, very high. And I love all the side characters. And I love the world that we experience. I love the Labyrinth as a set. I love the mystery of Daedalus. I love the scene with Eurytion and Geryon. I love Nico as kind of this side, scheme plotter, wants his own way, just getting in Percy's way. There's a variety of reasons that I love it. But yeah, Battle of the Labyrinth for sure is definitely my favorite. Oliver Finstead says, which order do you recommend to read the Song of Ice and Fire books? I would just go one through 5, and then once you're done with the 5th one, then you can go back and read the other ones. So once you read the original series, it really... Arguably, you can read the other books. So there's a few side books, right? There's World of Ice and Fire is kind of a world-building book. Fire and Blood is the prequel. That's what House of the Dragon is based off of. They stand alone completely. You don't have to rely on Game of Thrones or A Song of Ice and Fire to read the prequel books. You don't. That being said, I think they're more enjoyable if you know what's coming in the future. So I would read the first 5, and then probably read Fire and Blood, and then the Hedge Knight. But it's totally up to you. Once you read the first 5 books, you can read any of the others. And honestly, at that point, there's really no real order. Just as long as you read the A Song of Ice and Fire books in order, you can read any of the prequel books whenever you want. Nicole Boynton says, are you going to redo every Harry Potter book or just the first one? I think just the first one. The first one was the one where I was really disappointed in my performance compared to where I ended up. And so once I got done with Deathly Hallows and had done all 7 books, I wanted to go back and redo the first one. I think I really started to get into my performance and my character during the second one. I'm satisfied with the 3rd through the 7th. And so I think if I ever redo another one, it'll be the second one. But the other ones I don't have any plans on redoing. And at the moment, I don't have plans on redoing the second one. Serial said, did Bob's voice change? Not on purpose. If I did, it was an accident. I do my best to stick with the same voices for the characters. Every once in a while, I kind of forget what happens. I do know for a fact that I consciously gave Bob more of an edge to his voice when his memory started to come back. But in terms of his total voice changing at a random point, if I forgot to do the voice correctly and changed it, then that is on me. But as far as I know, I didn't do that on purpose. Pip Jackson says, doesn't Hermione destroy the cup? Yes, yeah. So if you guys saw the trivia question, it was either today or yesterday, talking about how many Horcruxes Harry destroys. I think in the description at the bottom it says Ron destroys the cup and the locket. And that's not true. Ron has the idea of how to destroy the cup, but in both book and film, Hermione is the one who stabs it. So that was just an oversight on me when I was typing out that question. So yes, Hermione does destroy the cup in both film and book. Jeff McJefferson has to go. Just want to say thank you for answering questions, and thank you for all of your excellent readings. Well, thank you very much, Jeff. I hope to see you here in a couple weeks. Jackson Buchanan says, have you read Christmas Dragon? No, I have not. Let's go to a question from Cameron Everson, who says, are you going to continue your 21 Pilots series? At the moment, no. So I have a second channel, for those of you who weren't aware. I have a second channel called SheetG, and I don't think there's a description, a link in the description below. But if you guys look up SheetG, SHEET space G, you should find a channel with basically the exact same logo as Echo Wirm, but green instead of yellow. That's where I do all of my personal and long form like essay analysis type stuff, as well as a bunch of other stuff. It's just kind of my second fun channel. And I did start a 21 Pilots retrospective video series. And originally I was working on the 3rd one, and I kind of got writer's block on it. And so I had been promising a release date. Well, then came the fact that the first 2, as far as I am aware, are currently no longer public. They were removed not removed, but they, Warner Brothers, with the release of the new album, cracked down on videos with 21 Pilots music in it. And so we didn't get a copyright strike, but it is not viewable in the United States at the moment. So going forward, I don't know how much I can do, because most of my enjoyment of those videos was the ranking and analyzing the music. And if we can't do that because we can't put the songs in the videos, then I don't know if I want to continue that series. So at the moment, I'm going to pause that series, but we'll see. We'll see if there are options going forward. Jeeves says, when is the classic series going to be added to your Doctor Who timeline? So this is a question, again, about the second channel. I just released an over 2-hour version of basically the entire linear timeline of Doctor Who. So if you guys are fans of Doctor Who or are familiar with it, it's a show about time travel. And so what I did is I took basically every episode of the show, at least every episode of the revived series of the show since 2005, and I took every event and put it in chronological order. And so that video is over on my other channel if you guys want to check that out. And the question is about the classic series. So Doctor Who's been around since 1963. It was canceled in 1989 and was brought back in 2005. And I have everything from 2005 to the present on that video, but I don't have all of the classic series, the original run in the 60s through 80s. I'm slowly working on it. My goal is to have it up for the Christmas special that is coming up at Christmas. I'll do an updated version of it at Christmas. And if I don't get all of the classic series on there, then my goal is to have all of the classic series on for the 15th season update, which will be probably next summer. So at least by next summer, but my goal is to try to get it up by Christmas. Jackson Buchanan says, do you know how many books you've read? Ever? Probably around 1,000. I know I own about, I would say I own about 1,200 books in my house at the moment. And I've probably read about 1,000 books. Ethan Montgomery says, how much do I have to pay to be eligible for your Patreon challenge? Good question. Just $3 a month. So the Patreon challenge that I have for you guys that are patrons or have considered it or even just are interested in being a part of this community at a greater point. What I'm doing right now is I am currently at about 500 paid patrons. And so once we get to 1,000 paid patrons, I'm going to give away an entire box set of the first 5 Percy Jackson books. I'm going to give away an entire box set of the Heroes of Olympus, and I'm going to give an entire box set of the Harry Potter books to one of my members. It doesn't matter how much you pay, as long as you are a paid member on Patreon and we hit that 1,000 patron paid member mark. I'm going to give away 3 different full book series to a lucky member. So if you guys want to be a part of that, just $3 a month. All you have to do is become a member and be a paying member by the time that we hit that 1,000 mark. So totally up to you if you want to be a part of that. You get everything over there in advance for just $3 a month. That also gives me the opportunity to pitch my book club. So that is for $3 a month. If you guys have the ability to do $25 a month or more, I will give you a free book every month. And I know Joseph is a part of this. I know there are a bunch of other people, Zhukov, Lydia, and I have done signed books, like book signings for people and mailed them out to people. But for the most part, at the beginning of every month, I will send you a physical copy of basically whatever we're doing on Patreon. So right now, if you became a $25 a month or more member over on Patreon, I would send you for free a physical copy of House of Hades, so you guys can read along with it on the channel if that's something you're interested in. So $25 a month or more if you want to be a part of that, and you also get your name in the credits of pretty much every video. Let's see here. Joseph Morrill says, I'm part of the book club. I got Dune, Mark of Athena, and House of Hades. Yes. Joseph, I always love your requests. I enjoy them. I can't always afford them at the times that you want them, but yes, I do enjoy sending little signatures and adding little notes. And every once in a while, if people ask me to sign copies for them, I'll use their copies as like the books that I read from. So if you ever see me do like a live reading, it might end up being a copy that I send you. So Perkabest says, how long are your live streams? Typically about 2 hours. We're coming up on about 2 hours. We're at about 150 right now. So I usually try to keep it around 2 hours. But I have about 10 questions left pre-prepared. And if you guys want to ask more, you're more than welcome to do so. So there are 8 of you here right now if you guys want to ask more questions. And I'll try to get those answered in the next 20 minutes or so. Question from, sorry, let me take a sip real quick. Roderick Garola, who says, why did you cut the Voyage of the Dawn Treader into chapters instead of doing the whole thing? You had the whole thing, but now I can't watch it, and the other Narnia books are not in chapters. So as far as I'm aware, Voyage of the Dawn Treader has never been available on YouTube in its entirety. How we do all things on the channel, essentially, is 1 chapter a day. And then once we get through all the chapters, I'll compile them into a full video. So Voyage of the Dawn Treader, right now, I want to say we're on like the 13th chapter or so. And I think there's like 17 or 18 chapters of Voyage of the Dawn Treader. So as soon as we get through all 18 chapters, the full version will be available on the channel. And that's typically how we do basically every book that is available on the channel. So like I said, I don't think Voyage of the Dawn Treader has ever been available for non-members or non-patrons. If it was, that's something I am not aware about. So, Ryder Williams says, when will Dune be up on the regular channel? So we just finished Dune over on Patreon. All 3 parts are available over on Patreon. That's that $3 a month. It's going to start on the channel at the end of July, I believe, and be up probably in its entirety around the end of August. So August is going to be Dune month. Hot month, Arrakis, desert is kind of what my theming was there. So yes, so Dune should be coming to the channel in about a month or so. But if you guys want it now, it's over on Patreon. Sophia Fisk says, what do you have up on Patreon right now that's not available on the main channel? So Dune, the entirety of Voyage of the Dawn Treader. I have Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, and then all of the Harry Potter books over there, but those are for free. And then we have the first half of House of Hades. About 30 more chapters than are on the channel are available over on Patreon. And then we just started the Silver Chair. So if once you're done with Voyage of the Dawn Treader and you want to start on the Silver Chair, that's what's going on over on Patreon right now. So if you're interested in that, like I said, $3 a month or more. Philip LaCroix says, almost finished with your Percy Jackson series. Firm handshakes, my friend. Well, thank you very much. I really appreciate hearing stuff like that. I'm happy to have you be a part of it. Jelena Targaryen says, what did you think of the first 2 episodes of House of the Dragon? I really liked them, especially the second one. I wasn't quite sure how I felt about the first one. I wasn't quite sure how I felt about Blood and Cheese. But seeing the repercussions of that, seeing Eric Bowl, seeing everything, episode 2 was great. I far preferred episode 2 to episode 1. And I think episode 2 is definitely along the same lines that I felt in season 1. I'm very excited to see where the season goes. I'm not entirely sure where they're going to do the cutoff point for the end of season 2, but so far I'm very impressed. It's for the most part been up to par with season 1 for me. I wasn't thrilled with some of the CGI in the first episode, but season 2 seems to have fixed some of the issues that I had with the first one, or episode 2, I should say. Ryan Tandall says, did you know you say I ate the kitchen table at the beginning of Sea of Monsters before correcting yourself? I did know that. It is my most famous blunder, and the reason I say most famous is because that's, like, people comment it all the time. At one point in Sea of Monsters, Percy starts a chapter by saying, I ate at the kitchen table, and of course I said I ate the kitchen table. Which brings me to my merch page. So if you guys want to celebrate in my most famous blunder, here is the I Ate the Kitchen Table shirt, which is available over on Bonfire. The t-shirt is $20. I think the long sleeve is like $25, pullover hoodie maybe $30, crew neck maybe $35. So fairly cheap in terms of how shirts usually go. But those are available down in the description below if you look for the merch tab. But yes, I was well aware of it. People never stop reminding me. Olivia Johnstone says, when are we getting a full narration in a Canadian accent? Great question. If you guys know of any Canadian authors or books that are set in Canada that you would like me to read on the channel, I will definitely consider it. Because I would love to do it. I've had a blast reading for all of the Canadian characters in the Heroes of Olympus, whether it be Frank, whether it be the Boreads, whether it be, yeah. I enjoy reading with my natural accent, so I'm happy to do it if you guys want me to. Will Laverius says, who is your favorite character in House of the Dragon? My favorite, oh boy, probably Helena. Helena's just been so much fun. She, in the books, they refer to her as just simple-minded. But in the show, it's very heavily implied that she's autistic or just on the spectrum, neurodivergent, however you want to word it. And it gives a very interesting perspective on everything going on. So, yeah, Helena is always fun to watch. The performance is very, very good. Otherwise, I think this season, Egan has become really, really enjoyable to watch. I'm a huge Matt Smith fan, so I enjoy watching Daemon on screen. I miss Viserys a lot. I miss the original actresses who played the girls, but I think for me it has to be Helena right now. Casey Campbell says, would you rather be at Camp Half-Blood or Jupiter and why? I'd say Camp Half-Blood because I'm more familiar with it. I was wondering what I Ate the Kitchen Table was. Yeah, for me it's Camp Half-Blood, and it's just that, you know, I grew up with it. That's what I'm familiar with, and I've never connected with the Roman stuff the way other people might have, and so yeah, I've always enjoyed Camp Half-Blood significantly more. It's always felt safer to me. Just more cozy, more homey. Pergabest says, how can I DM you? You can DM me through Discord. There should be an active link in the description below. If for whatever reason the link doesn't work, let me know and I will get you an active one that does work. Otherwise, Patreon, I don't know if you can DM me unless you have a membership, but those are the two places there. Joseph Morrill says, I wish Harry got to have his godfather and get away from the Dursleys earlier on, man. Yeah, it's a tragic story, and it makes sense in world, but it's not, it doesn't make it any easier, if that makes any sense. So, a few more questions here. If you guys have any more questions, feel free to ask them. Otherwise, I will save them for our next live stream, because I'm going to start wrapping things up here in about 10 minutes or so. Emma Harris says, what videos do you have coming out next on your other channel? So over on Sheet G, I mentioned the Doctor Who video just came out. I am currently working on continuing my NFL timeline series. I am kind of halfway through the 50s and 60s versions, and then I still have to record everything else. Excuse me. My wife and I recorded a GeoGuessr video that I think either came out today or is scheduled to come out tomorrow. I'll have to check that. If you guys want to go check that out, that is me beating my wife in GeoGuessr. I had a lot of fun with that one. And then the other one, I'm starting like a computer games or video games for my childhood series. And so there's a Pop Tropica video coming out soon, just like a revisit of Pop Tropica. And then in October, I know this is a ways off, but around Halloween time, we're doing that same series, but for Garfield's Scary Scavenger Hunt. So I'm excited for that. Perkabest says, where's your description? Below my face right now on your screen, if you click, like, I don't know how to describe it. If you're watching on a computer or on the YouTube app, and you go to my face, and right here it says like more, right under Open Q&A live stream. If you click more, it should have a whole bunch of words that pop up, and there should be a whole bunch of links there. Let me know if you can't find it. If you can't find it, let me know, and I will try to direct you better than that. We are almost at 5,000 subscribers. That is huge. Thank you very much. Let's go one more question here, and then I will answer whatever ones you guys have left. Fabian Labian says, when are we getting more live reading videos? I think this was asked earlier. As soon as I can, or as soon as I think about it. My big worry is that 2 of the series that I've done live videos for have now hit us with copyright warnings. And so I don't want to, I feel like a weird challenge from that, and I don't want to go even further with that, if that makes any sense. Perkabest says, I can't find it. What are you watching on? Are you watching on phone or like mobile, or if you can't find it there, your best option is to go to the channel. So if you go to, if you just look up Echo Wirm Audiobooks and you see the channel, at the bottom of the channel, right above where it says subscribed, it should give you 2, it should say Vimeo Showcase and 2 more links. And then that should open up a series of links. One of them is Vimeo, one of them is Patreon, one of them is Discord. Let me know if you still can't find it. Casey Campbell says, I agree about Sirius and Dumbledore's death was the hardest on me. I love him and Snape. I hate the hate they get. What are your thoughts on them? This is obviously going to be controversial, though. You're not going to like my Snape opinion. And I want to clarify that if you haven't read the books and you've only seen the film, then you might be more sympathetic to Snape. But I do really like Dumbledore. I think Dumbledore's a fantastic character. His motivations are sometimes like weird. Like some people think his attitude toward Harry is somewhat predatory, not in like a gross way, but like he is using this child for his own benefit or for the benefit of the world, and Harry doesn't deserve that sort of thing, which is true. But his means are positive. Whereas with Snape, he does have the redemption arc, but the big thing with Snape is, in the books, Snape is an asshole. Snape is not a good person. Snape has a lot of tragedy in his life, and he takes that out on other people, and it's the second part of that that's not okay. He doesn't ever try to be a better person. The only reason he does what he does is for his own benefit. He feels guilt about Lily's death, and so he tries to absolve himself of that sin. So does he redeem himself? Maybe, but his reasons for redeeming himself aren't from a redemptive... It's so he doesn't feel guilty anymore. It's weird because Harry describes Snape as the bravest man he ever met, which may be true. Snape's motivations were brave. The things that he did in front of Voldemort were brave. But keep in mind, this is the same character who threatened to kill Neville's pet. This is the character who went out of his way to bully teenagers, who, like, cannot get over the fact that he was bullied in high school. And so Snape is a very, very gray character in describing for me. Joseph Morrill says, Snape POV in the books. How do I bully a child today? Snape is taking out his anger from his own failed adolescence on other people who don't deserve that. And that's what's not okay. So I think like Snape's redemption is great, but I think Snape as a character is still not a good person, if that makes any sense. Let me... okay, I will add a new Discord. Give me 30 seconds here. I'm going to go to Discord, and I'm going to go invite a friend, copy link. All right. Now I'm going to go to my channel description, and I'm going to update that. So if I go to the channel description, and I do apologize if you can hear my kids screaming upstairs. It's dinner time, so I do have to get up there fairly soon here. Where are my links here? Okay. I can't find a way to add my links right now, but I do promise that I will update the Discord. So if you check again in about 10 minutes, you should be able to click the Discord link. So with that being said, I think I'm going to pull this to a close. So like I said, if you guys do want to message me on Discord or join the Discord, I will update the Discord links. So refresh in about 10 minutes, and then it should be correct there. That being said, if you have any other questions you want answered, don't add them in the live chat, add them to the comments of this video, and I will bring them up the next time we do a live stream. My goal is to do a live stream in 2 weeks' time. I believe that's the 11th, if I did my math correctly. But until then, check out anything on the channel. Let me know what you guys want to see, what you're curious about. Leave any comments.